What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So I've been getting a lot of requests from you guys just about some different questions that you had based on some of the terminology that I was using in my past video. Kind of overstable, understable, what do even the numbers mean on a disc? How do I know what I'm throwing? And like, your discs look cool. Is there anything like, why did you choose those discs for your bag, kind of thing like that. And I realized that for those of you who are new to disc golf and watching this, you probably don't know anything about what those numbers mean on your disc, or like what you should be throwing, or what overstable or understable means. You probably just picked up a disc and you're like, hey, I'm gonna throw this today and see how it goes. So I'm hoping to bring a little bit more clarity to you guys on that topic. So the first thing we should talk about are the two different ways that you can throw a disc, okay? So you can either throw it forehand or backhand, okay? Forehand is typically like the normal sports throwing motion. It's how you would throw a baseball, maybe like a football sidearm kind of throw. It's like this kind of motion, just a normal sports throwing motion. And a lot of people actually start out playing like that. For some, it may be more natural to throw a disc with the backhand. So that is pretty unique to the sports world. It is the motion that looks like this. I don't know how better to describe it. You're bringing the disc across your body and out. Rather, with a forehand, you are throwing it kind of the side of your body like this. So those are the two different kinds of disc golf throws. Okay, we've got, this one is the Insanity, and it's a 9.5, -2, 1.5. And you're probably like, I have no idea what that means. That's okay. That's what we're going to talk about today. Another good thing that we need to note is that all of these numbers that I'm about to share with you, these are made for right hand backhand throwers. It's called RHBH if you ever see it online, okay? And what that means is that all these numbers are assuming that you are right-handed and you're going to be throwing right-handed backhand, okay? Right-handed backhand like this. And those numbers are that's just the standard for how those numbers are ranked, so that there can be consistency, a little bit more consistency across numbers when they start to tell you how your disc is gonna fly in the air. Okay, so our first number that we're looking at, this 9 here, the number that's in the first slot on your disc is gonna be the speed of your disc. The speed of your disc is essentially how fast that disc is gonna fly in the air. With the speed of a disc, you can have anywhere between a 1 speed and a 14 speed. 1 speed being the slowest speed, 14 speed being the highest speed. Faster discs cut into the air with less effort and require less effort to throw into the wind. And a slower disc is going to require more effort to do so, but you'll be able to control a slower disc better. The higher speed a disc is, say if you've got like a 13 speed, like this Nuke that I have here, I would not recommend this for beginners. For a beginner, I would recommend that you try to throw lower speeds first and definitely work on your form and your arm power before you throw anything this fast, because this is not going to get the correct flight for you because the disc is just too fast for where you're probably at. Okay, so now the second number that we're dealing with, on my disc it's a 5. On your disc it may be something different, but that second number refers to the glide of the disc. Now what do I mean when I say glide? The glide can be anywhere between 1 to 7. A disc with a lower glide is going to fare a lot better in windier situations. The higher the glide of a disc, the more affected it is by the wind. But also, if you choose a disc with higher glide, it will probably go further. It will glide further in the air, typically. But the pros and cons to that is that if you have a disc with high glide, you'll probably get more distance out of it. But if there is a lot of wind or any wind on the course, it could be more affected by the wind as it is more glidey. In general, I would say for most players, they're gonna want a disc with a higher glide just so that they can get some more distance, especially for newer players. So try to look for discs with higher glide, maybe like 5 and above. Okay, so now the third number that we have on our discs, on mine it's a -2 right here, but the third number that's on our discs is gonna be the turn of our discs. So what do I mean when I say turn? Your turn is the tendency of a disc to want to turn over to the right. when you throw it. Now, remember, we're throwing right hand, backhand shots right now. So if I'm throwing right hand, backhand, I'm gonna throw it, and eventually it's gonna wanna come to the left. We'll talk about that, that's our last number. But turn is it wanting to go over to the right, still wanting to go over to the right. Now, the ranges for turn are +1 to -5. +1 is the most resistant for it to want to turn over to the right. So it's most resistant against that. It's not going to want to turn over to the right if you have a +1. This is the most overstable disc I have. We'll talk about that in a second too. It's a 0.5. It's that closest to 1. So when I throw this, it's really not wanting to go to the right. It's always going to be fighting against that urge to go to the right. And this is the most understable disc I have. We'll talk about that in a second. This is my Avenger SS. It is a -3. So again, I said it could get all the way up to a -5 on turn. So -3 is when I throw this, it really is going to want to turn over to the right a little bit before it comes and finishes at the end. So the lower number you have, if it's in the negatives, it's probably going to want to turn to the right a little bit before it finishes its flight. And if it has a higher number, like a +1, probably -1 to +1, it's probably not going to want to turn to the right that much. And now we have our last number. On my disc, that's going to be a 1.5 here, kind of like in the middle. Probably not a great disc to pick because there's like decimals on MVP discs, they're a little funky, but don't worry about that. So that last number is going to be your fade. And with a fade, that's the disc's tendency to want to hook left at the end of its flight. So remember, we just talked about turn, its tendency to want to go right during the initial part of the flight. Well, in reality, all of the discs, when we're throwing right hand, backhand, are going to want to end up finishing left. So this fade, this last number fade, is going to be how hard it wants to finish to the left at the end of a flight. So on your fade, it's rated from 0 to 5. So you can either have a 0 or a 5. The zeros was no fade. So if it's 0 fade, it's probably going to finish pretty straight. It's probably going to go pretty straight. It's not going to want to hook too bad over to the left when it finishes. It's probably going to finish pretty straight, not a lot of fade. Now, if it's a 5 fade, that thing is a meat hook. That thing is going to be coming in hot and going left pretty hard at the end of the flight. So those are two things to look out for too in your discs as well. Make sure you're looking at the fade. Okay, so now let's talk about a couple other terms that I said a little bit throughout there. I think I tried not to, but we're definitely going to get a definition for now. So when I say stability, the stability of the disc is going to be a description of the disc's flight path. Now you can have about 3 different categories that a disc mainly is going to fit in. You have your overstable category, your neutrally stable or stable category, and your understable category. So for stability, we're going to be looking at 2 major things on your disc, the last 2 numbers that I talked about. So that's going to be your turn and your fade. An overstable disc is going to be a disc that has a very low turn, or a higher, they're going to have a higher number here. So you're going to be looking at a disc like this. It's going to have a 0.5, a 1, something that's a positive turn, or even 0 or -1. That's going to be something that's going to be a bit more overstable. It's not going to want to turn to the right during the flight. It's going to want to finish pretty hard left. And again, that's where we get to our fade as well. A disc with a higher fade is probably going to be more overstable because it's going to want to hook and finish really hard left. It's not going to want to go right at all with the turn, and with the fade, it's going to want to finish hard left. So disc that's going to be more overstable is going to have a higher number for a turn. It's not going to want to fight right. It's going to want to go left, and a higher number for fade. It's going to want to finish hard left. Okay. Understable. So we talked about overstable. Understable is going to be the disc wants to turn right when you throw it. If you're throwing it right hand, backhand, it's really not going to want to go left or finish hard left. It's actually going to want to keep going right when you throw it. So that's kind of what the understability of a disc means. Now, a disc is going to be more understable when it has those negative turn numbers, okay? So anything like -2, -3, all the way to -5. That's probably going to be a good indicator that it is an understable disc. It's also going to have a lower fade too. So that's going to be like 0 fade or a 1 fade, something that has a lower number for fade, because the fade, remember we talked about, is the tendency for a disc to finish to the left. It doesn't want to go left. When it's understable, it wants to go right. And then when we talk about a disc that's stable, that's just right in between overstable and understable. It's going to be a disc that doesn't want to finish super hard left, but also isn't going to go right. It's going to be a disc that's going to go pretty straight, and it is still going to finish to the left, but not dramatically. So that's overstable, understable, and stable. So with all that said, what are my recommendations for beginners? My recommendations for beginners are: do not throw overstable discs. This is a huge mistake that I made in my career, as the overstable discs tend to be very forgiving to your form. If you're throwing overstable discs, you're not going to get much better at the sport, because they don't encourage you to change up the details in your form. For example, an overstable disc is going to be less affected by the wind, less affected by a lot of factors, and it's going to have a really consistent finish. It's going to want to go here, and it's going to finish hard left every single time. Now that may sound easy and appealing, but it really isn't going to be doing you any favors in the long run if you do want to keep playing this sport. Because if you need to throw something understable, you're not going to be able to get those touchy shots as well, because you probably didn't work on your form very well, because you can throw an overstable disc with terrible form for a long time, and that's what I was doing. And that's a mistake that I made that I really would love you guys not to make. So when you're starting out with disc golf, try to pick understable discs. Just a little bit more understable, or even if you have to, get into the stable range, but try not to throw anything overstable. Additionally, remember when we talked about speed? When we're talking about speed for beginners, it's best to throw a slower speed. Again, I was throwing higher speeds, and just because my arm speed wasn't fast enough to throw it, I wasn't strong enough, I didn't have the right form, and that, when you're throwing a disc that's too high of a speed for you as a beginner, and your form's not very good, it's also going to make that disc act even more overstable. Just because you can't throw it as far, it's coming out of your hands and it's slowing down, which is giving weight to the turn and fade to just crash it hard over to the left. And it was pretty consistent for me, but it is not a good way to keep playing the sport. So I would really recommend not doing that and trying to learn with throwing a little bit touchier discs. These require a little bit more finesse, and if you start out with these kinds of discs, these little bit more understable to stable discs, it will help you immensely in your career as a disc golfer, or just even in your free time, I guess, because it is just a hobby for some. Okay, so let's do a recap, okay? I want you all to pause the video. I'm gonna go through the numbers right now. You better go through them with me, okay? Our first one, we've got speed, then we have glide, then we have turn, and then we have fade. Okay, so we have speed, glide, turn, fade. My recap tips for beginners: throw discs with a slower speed and that are more understable. Okay. If you have any other questions, let me know. Drop them down in the comments. I hope that this video was helpful for you, and I wish you all the best. We'll see you later.